Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fife Property Show this Saturday morning. Today's topic is buy-to-let broken? Facts, figures, and future trends for private landlords. Jim is joining me this morning. How are you, Jim?
Hi, absolutely fantastic as usual. Ready to go.
Good. A brilliant topic, actually. Quite a lot to talk about. I mean, facts, figures, and future trends is something that we continually push and put out there. I mean, obviously, stick to the facts, make sure your figures are right, and keep on track with future trends. It's something that we've went through a lot of times.
I always remember the phrase that someone else told me. He says, the problem about opinions, even idiots have them. And the reality is, it comes down to the brass tacks about what is the facts, what is the fundamentals behind this, and what is driving the market. I mean, we're going to be talking about the Fife property crash in 2022 tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. There's a plug for the show. So tune in.
But we're all and you're plugging
it's all based on facts and figures, and we're going to talk about the wealth creation show as well on Monday at 12:30. But it's all facts and figures, isn't it? And the reason I do that is so the people out there actually watching this and listening to this on the podcast as well and reading the article actually fully understand where this is driven from and our expert opinion on where it is. Now, I know I talked about even idiots have opinions, but I've been in this for 30 years, so I think I might know something about this.
Yeah, I think we've got quite a lot of regular watchers here that they keep track of all the shows, and I think they'll realise because they watch each one how they all kind of do merge into each other and they're all relevant. So yeah, do catch them tomorrow morning at 9, and then we've got the wealth creation Monday at 12:30.
For you, this is what you should be doing. You should be gathering as much information as possible to get that right, to know that way forward and what you should be doing next. No, just throwing caution to the wind and having a go and seeing how you get on. I mean, that's not the way to do it. It's actually solid information backed up by facts and figures. I mean, it's not going to combat everything all the time. But the reality is it's certainly going to stand you in good stead and give you a better position in terms of where you're going. That's really what it comes down to.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Knowledge is key, as they would say. Just a good morning. Good morning, Angela. And people
morning,
watching.
Angela.
Anybody else, please jump in, give us a good morning. Any questions as we go through, please.
If you've got anybody out there, listen, at the end of the day, you've got one of the top letting agents in Scotland on this show, and you've got one of the top investors in the UK on this show. So there's your golden opportunity. You've got two people expert in their fields to ask any question you want. Even if it sounds really daft or if it's just entry-level stuff, it doesn't matter. It's the start of your journey to get where you're going. That's what it's all about, and that's why we do these shows.
Yeah, I mean, don't be scared to come forward. But I mean, if you think the question may be stupid, it may not be. There isn't a stupid question, I don't think. I think as long as you're asking questions, it shows your willingness that you want to kind of build your knowledge and learn.
Well, we know there is a stupid question. It's the one that's never asked.
But don't have the fear, and that's what we're talking about on Monday. So there's another plug for Monday's show.
And that's it, the fear. And the fear is connected to this, isn't it? This is exactly what we're talking about right now. It's the fear that drives that forward and keeps people from actually achieving anything. And, absolutely right. We're going to be talking about that Monday at 12:30 and how to overcome that fear. But let's get back to this. Right, kick off, Richard. Let's go. I'm ready. Ready to go.
Ready to go. There is no denying that obviously buy-to-let isn't the same as it was 10, 15 years ago. And changes in lending criteria, I mean, that landlords have to put in more of their own money, and changes in tax policy have affected initial yields. Changes in lettings legislation have changed what it is to own a rental property. So as the rental sector has moved away from short-term profits, corporate investment in buy-to-lets is on the rise, with major institutions attracted by the long-term prospects of growth and income. Now, in it for the long term is something, again, that we cover quite a lot, Jim, long-term passive income and things as well. I know this is obviously referring to the corporate investments and things, but I think as a landlord or a buy-to-let investor yourself, then I think your vision needs to be for the long term.
Always long term. There's never any doubt in my mind. Yeah. I mean, we do talk about some people get into this for the short-term profits, and it's like, geez, if you're getting into this for the short-term profits, go away. It's like you'll never make short-term profits in the buy-to-let investment business. It just doesn't work like that at all. These people out there that say, "Oh, I bought a property and I did a wee bit of improvement and I've made £50,000 on it. Have you sold it? Oh no, you've not sold it. So you've not made anything. You maybe release the cash, but then you've obviously got a deferred taxation liability sitting in the background, and possibly a situation where you actually can't pay off the mortgage anymore because you've actually remortgaged it so much. The value of the property isn't recompensed to be able to do that with the capital gains combined. So, you know, that's another story, by the way. So that's what they don't understand. The complete naivety of the new investors coming in and not understanding and just listening to the new investors just one step ahead of them. That's the problem here, because they're going out and teaching people, saying that this is what you're doing, we're all going to be rich. It's like, you're not all going to be rich. Some of you are going to, quite a lot of you are going to fall by the wayside, especially if you're following that model. But some of you hang on in there, understand the dynamics and the mental torment it puts in your mind, and all these wee fear things that go on in your mind. If you can overcome that, you will succeed in buy-to-let, no bother. It is just a matter of time and being paid while it goes for that time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, is the future only for big boys, or is there a small place for independent landlords to have their thriving and profitable business? We're going to look today at factors affecting the market today, tomorrow, and so you could choose whether buy-to-let is for you. There's a lot of things we're going to cover today that I think will be quite relevant to a lot of new investors and existing investors, like you say, Jim, as well. So I think firstly, I mean, are landlords panic selling? I mean, we've seen some of this.
If you're selling, I'm buying. buying. It's like the stock market. Yeah, buying, selling. No, I'm buying, always buying. There's never a time that I'll be selling. Unless I know I can make a more significant return somewhere else, or I want to take that money in order to alleviate my capital gains tax position again. Because sometimes it's a really good strategy for capital gains, because you get an allowance every single year. If you're married, you get the dual allowance. So you've got a capital gains allowance of almost £25,000 every year before you actually pay tax. So sometimes it's worth actually selling from you to your limited company to get rid of that gain, and then remortgage with a limited company on the higher rate. And then that's when you don't have that deferred taxation liability for capital gains, because you've used it in your own right. And you've actually mitigated that. So that's a real good strategy to do that.
Yeah.
But things like you mentioned there about major institutions. Major institutions might go for the bigger portfolio developments, you know, like Cardone does, like the 200 and 300 units. But no, the small buy-to-let landlord is here to stay, because we're adaptable, flexible in terms of what we do. Maybe the legislation is going to get more encumbrant. Yes, we've got all rent controls and stuff like that. But if you plan and make sure you're mitigated for these circumstances, then you're fine. You didn't need to worry about things like that coming in, because it's like, okay, then it's going to come in. It's not going to really affect me because I've already planned for that happening. So everything is around that level anyway. So again, this is all successive shows that we are doing in order to educate people to that level, to understand that it really is a professional environment. I talked to Elaine about this morning, you know, how many people are actually going on and spouting off these different statistics and all these different buzzwords. And I said, we're really going to have to get some sort of industry standard for training for the buy-to-let industry, because it's amazing how many people are out there just throwing all that crap at people that actually, we're going to be millionaires next year because
impressionable people, and obviously they take what they're saying as
advantage. It is really taking advantage. Now I'm involved in a system right now, and I honestly, my eyes have been opened completely how these people take advantage of the other people just waiting in the sidelines. It's almost like a feeding frenzy once they get a hold of these people from all the different people round about them. And for me, it's actually diabolical. I'm at the point of actually saying, forget it. It's like, I'm not wanting anything to do with this, but I'm going to go through the journey for the whole year to collate and gather this information to find out exactly what's going on behind the scenes, because I know there's very successful trainers. This person is actually training elsewhere, and you know, when I see all the things that they're using, I think that's not right. That's not right at all, in my opinion, anyway. But people out there, it's like, oh, why should you take that away from me? That right to actually be successful? And it's like, no, the majority of people are actually not going to make it in these systems. They just rely on getting paid, and the whole. And I hate to say it, I know you're in business to make money, but the whole systems are actually derived to make money. That is all they're there for.
Yeah.
They know how to help you. they're definitely not out to help you. They're just there to get as much money as possible out of you in various different ways to upsell everything else from then on, as soon as they get you in a free course.
Yeah, there's a lot of upselling for these things.
Free course, that's never free, I'll tell you, because the way they use it and the way they interpret it and show you how to do it, and also almost become an evangelistic or whatever it is about the whole situation, gets you going and you want to buy into it. And then the next minute it's like, if you can't afford £2,000 for a course, it's I'm getting my high horse here, by the way. If you can't afford £2,000 per course, then this is why you need this course. Yeah, that's a really good argument. But where are you right now? It's like, I'm just at the start of my journey. Well, wait a minute. You meant to say you're teaching me on how to be successful in buy-to-let, but you're just at the start of your journey. There's genuinely people out there saying things, and I know they're not even close to where I am.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, God, I wouldn't even say that. It's like, because that to me is just misleading. So it's let's get back to this. Let's not talk about that anymore, because we'll have a whole show about
that. I do agree though. But yes, we could digress on that for quite some time. But yeah, back on topic, and landlord panic selling. And what I think is quite interesting, we've seen some landlords selling up, but generally it's those that are focused and relying on the monthly income of their buy-to-lets to pay their and to kind of make their source of income or pay their mortgage and things. These are the ones that we tend to see that are exiting the market and are in or maybe some that are in a situation, rather than investors with bigger portfolios who are in it for the long term, as we've just covered. The most successful landlords have always taken a long-term view over their investment. As such, they're keeping hold of their rental homes and even expanding their portfolios. Capital growth is their priority, and they take care to ensure that their buy-to-lets are well managed and stay ahead of the market and attract the high-quality tenants. And ultimately, that's what we see as the most successful investors, and with portfolios similar to this.
Now, the thing here is, yes, there's a lot of landlords. Dare I say a lot of landlords? It depends what you think's a lot. There is landlords exiting the market, and yes, there has been a 1,200 property decrease in the Fife rental market in the last 5 years. Sorry. And that's been exacerbated by there's been about an 8,000 increase in home ownership in the Fife market in the last 5 years. So when you think about it, the proportion percentage-wise of the rental market compared to the proportion of the owner-occupier market is actually a lot less now than it was 5 years ago. So there is a lot less investment properties in the Fife area than there was 5 years ago. But then that causes a crisis, and we reckon we're probably needing about 1,400 new homes or rental homes every single year to keep up with the demand for people that want to rent for flexibility. So when people are actually exiting the market, what's happened is we've now got this exponential curve for the flats and apartments, like I spoke about last year, where it's going, the prices are going sky high, and they've been waiting ever since the credit crunch to offload their stock, because they've just been stuck with it because capital gains. They're all mortgaged in the credit crunch. I've got one myself. It's actually looking to offload about 40 properties, but they're all mortgaged up to the hilt in the credit crunch. The prices dropped like a stone. They were left with negative equity on their mortgages compared to the value of their property. And now it's recovered to this point in time where it's like, oh my God, I better get out as quick as possible. So these people have been waiting for the last 15 years almost on getting out of this market. And they've never been able to until right now because the price has actually increased. I mean, you're getting 2-bedroom flats now in the Leavenmouth area for 80 grand.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, 2 or 3 years ago, it was sitting at 55. It's like now and credit crunch wise, it was round about 2-bedroom flats were around about 70 to 75. So you can see how it's recovered to that state. We'll talk about that tomorrow anyway in the show. But that's why they're exiting. So that's why you're seeing a marked exodus right now, because property prices in the lower end of the market have actually increased so much. It's allowed them now to exit to get rid of their negative equity position. But the key here is they're exiting, right? They're getting rid of their negative equity position, and that's fine because it's not got negative equity anymore because it has actually increased enough. But then they're losing the income.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then they're like, what will I do now? Oh, I'll have to go and get a job. And it's like, are you nuts? Just hold on to it.
Yeah.
But it's because they've set it up wrong in the beginning. Here it is. Here's the experience talking. It's because they've set it up wrong in the beginning, and they've got a mortgage in their own name, and it's due to expire, because now maybe they've taken it for 20 years, and since the credit crunch, since they took it out, and they've got 15. They've only got 2 or 3 years to go before it actually expires, and they're not really sure if they can get that remortgaged. They're not even sure if the value is going to be right. So it's here it comes. It's fear that's driven that exit. It's the fear of the accidental. So for the accidental landlords, for the landlords that got walked into after the credit crunch, for the landlords that got misinformed about their property investments, because I've got one now that I'm actually guiding through. They've got 3 properties, and they were sold by Inside Track. I think it was Inside Track. You know, remember them? You know, it's like they were, oh, we've got investments everywhere. That's exactly what happens now. We've got a 10%, we've got an 8% yield, you've got a 25% yield, all these new developments. And that was kind of what Inside Track did. They're no longer here, by the way, because they went bust. But so the next lot will go bust as well, because that always happens. But they're actually doing that still now. And you'll get a next wave of people that will buy into that as well. It won't understand the dynamics of what's about to happen. Or what could happen, and not minimise their risk position or their exposure to the market overall. So they don't understand that how that relates. They just believe. Now, this person actually said, quite an educated person. I actually said to her, you know, it's like, why would you know? No. She went, I have no idea about the investment buy-to-let market. Says, you know, I just saw their show. I went into their free seminar. Here it comes. Went into a free seminar. They talked about how these investments are going to go up in value over the years, and I bought into it, and I've got these, and they're thorn in my side, and they've got rot, and they've got damp in it now, and it's going to cost me thousands to do it. And I'm like, did you never put any money aside to actually do all these improvements later on? Because you really do have to put a lot of money aside. You don't just.
She'll have never been advised of that.
She never understood the dynamics. No one took that on that education process after that, and actually made her understand that the buy-to-let market is not a constant cash cow that you make money every single month and you just
need to put back in.
You reinvest some. Fair enough. You might take a wee bit out, just as a, you know, it's probably a normal wage, like I do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't actually. But you reinvest it all the time to improve your stock, to keep it going, and to increase your wealth. Wealth's not taxable, remember. Income is. So increasing your wealth, more than likely. So I think it's accidental, and it's a rush now because of the increase in prices. These people are actually panic selling. But what happens is, you know yourself, the panic sell, when somebody starts selling and somebody else starts selling, somebody else starts selling, somebody else starts selling, it's then it cascades and everybody goes.
It has a knock-on effect.
And it's like pandemic with a loo roll.
It does have a knock-on effect.
Everybody's running to sell. And there's no real. So what are you selling for? Well,
everybody else is selling.
Aye. It's like, so why are you selling then? Where's the panic? Well, I never really thought about it. And it's like, well, there's the facts.
Yeah.
Why would you be selling? And that's the reality. That's what we're coming back to. So I think that's where it is. Okay. And I'll leave you. You know, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, what about the bigger story?
Yeah, I mean, the bigger story is obviously there's corporates that are entering the market. It states obviously that John Lewis intends to build 10,000 rental homes over the next 10 years. And Lloyds Banking Group have announced plans for 50,000.
I'll maybe do that again.
Yeah, 50,000 buy-to-lets in 2030.
We've been here before, Richard, and it was called, the Nationwide did it in Perth, and they called it, the division it was called, they called it At Home. So the wee art symbol and At Home. And,
I remember that.
I know that development, and that development is no longer in their ownership. It's actually just private owners now. So it's a classic example is they'll come and go, but there's not. They don't understand the dynamics of how to make the most money and the best money in the buy-to-let market, and they'll just be guided by investment and corporate investors. So it'll be back to this Inside Track scenario where they're fair enough, you're investing in new build, but I'll probably guarantee in the next, after they've built them, in the next 30 years and 40 years, they'll be looking at them and going, look at these monstrosities. God, it's like they're not even mortgageable now, because that's probably what will happen. we've kind of seen it all before. We see it in some developments in Glenrothes and that.
I was going to say the prefabs.
Hailed as have you seen the light? It's like, look at these beautiful prison cells.
Yeah, so and that's what they could be like.
Because that's effectively what they looked like, wasn't it? And yet, at that time, I remember on the press releases, I look back at them all, back in the 1950s, 1960s, and that, and they were hailed as the new revelation in housing and how everybody was going to be, up to date in terms of what they were doing. But now they're non-mortgageable and they're having to knock them all down.
Yeah.
So that's what will happen.
At the time,
they'll be completely misled by profits, and the only people that suffer is not the banks; it's the people they've convinced to invest in them.
That bought them, yeah.
It's the people that have convinced the banks to invest in the banks. So the only people that suffer are the shareholders in these banks because they got it wrong. The banks couldn't care less because the people getting paid the bonuses to do all this are away by now. It's like, I've done that and I made a fortune out of it, and I've basically got all that money off of all these investors. I made a fortune, but I'm off. It's not to do with me anymore because I don't work with these people. So that's classic example about how these work. Whereas us as private landlords and investors, we understand the dynamics of this because we live and breathe it every single day.
Yeah, as different for this side of the fence, I think, compared to that. But yeah, good to hear your views on things, Jim. And I think it brings us on nicely to our next topic, and obviously what you've touched on is no room for amateurs anymore.
Yeah.
And most of our landlords, and doubtless, that was a good analogy, Jim. But most of our landlords, and doubtless most others, are conscientious people. They're true professionals who care about their property and their tenants. I think that's really an important thing. However, it's good to remember that until relatively recently, the system has thoroughly exploited by a particular type who is used to lending rules, breaking tax breaks, and lax legislation to provide substandard rental homes and short-term gains at the expense of tenants. Now, we've spoken about this before, and it is a very small percentage nowadays.
It's something like 0.05% of the landlord population. According to the government, that's not my opinion. According to the government, less than 10,000 landlords they think are rogue landlords out of 2 million. Work that and do the math. It's a sledgehammer to crack a nut, all this legislation to combat 10,000 landlords who will not follow the legislation anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just piling all this legislation in on top of the existing people that are actually all above board and doing it properly and just making it a higher burden for them. And they're going to mess it up a bit. But hey, that's the way of life. That's how it works. As these people exit, our position gets stronger because there's more need for us. Then there's more demand for us because we're here and there's less stock. And therefore, when we go to the government and say, we don't like that bit of legislation, oh God, we don't want to upset them now because we've not even got anything in place to replace it. If they decide to just turn tail and just go, forget it, that's us out, then they're in a sticky position, the government. So they do need us. And we've been the lifeblood of their policy for years, and yet they won't even recognise that because it's not politically correct.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at some of the unsavoury formulas that are adopted by these kinds of landlords. I mean, obviously, buying the lowest quality properties in high demand areas is one thing. If people are doing HMOs and things like that, filling properties to the brim with as many tenants as possible, and obviously supplying the cheapest specification and appliances and things in a property as well, which is things that we've covered in a lot of other shows. Anything else to add to that, Jim?
I think repairs is a big one. It's the classic, and we've told a few landlords is forget it, we don't want to deal with you anymore, because when we've gone to them to do basic repairs, it's like, oh well, will it cost me? And maybe we should try this, and maybe I should go around and botch it myself. And it's like, you're with the wrong people. Clear off and go and get another letting agent. We're no wanting you. Subsequently, then we've just said to the tenant, if you want to come and move in one of our stock, we'll just take you. Because that, as far as I'm concerned, that's not what we're here for. Now, we'll never, you'll never appease every tenant, and you'll have the one or two which actually always think they're hard done by, but they don't realise what happens in the background with us in terms of what we're doing, because we don't explain it all and we don't let people see that. But often we, now and again, we'll have a wee bit set to with our landlord and say, this isn't on. You've got it. This is going to be done, whether you like it or not. And if you're not doing it, do one. We're no wanting you. That's the reality. Never invest in art and getting improvements. We've just covered that, haven't we? I mean, on average, I'll be honest. I think now my repairs. Just give me 2 seconds. I've got it there. My repairs. 70. My repairs for so far are £68,000 for 2021. Now that represents a percentage of round about 40% of my turnover, or 30 to 40% of my turnover. But I'm no bothered because this is always meant to be a wealth generator, and I can pull on it as an income generator if I want to. But I want to keep reinvesting and refurbishing my stock. So that includes things like when I buy a property. Then obviously when I buy a property, this is the one that you were talking about, buying the lowest quality property in a high demand area. Yes, I will do sometimes something like that. But then we talked about last night. I mean, the one that I've got the other night, I bought for another landlord. It's needing about 22,000 spent on it.
It's just
and it's
over
like,
22.
wait a minute. The other landlord was renting it, and I've taken it over, and I'm probably going to spend somewhere between 10 and 22,000 on it. So what does it say about the other landlord that had it?
I mean, that was the quote. That was the quote I got. I'm going to obviously revise that a wee bit.
And we know that because that's if you want a completely brand new property.
That's basically brand new.
You know, that's like taking a reasonable car and then saying, I tell you what, I'll just strip all the bodywork off and start again. So you know, there's within reason. But that's why I said between 10 and 22. So I'm giving you a wee guider there. I'm giving you a guider.
I know.
And the other one is filling the brim with as many tenants. Well, that tends to be down south a lot in cities as well, because
I know, and bigger,
it's limited by the you know, it's real high demand, but you've got limit. But the classic example is some actually take up the tenancy and then they bus all their friends in, and you actually don't know about that until later on when you get an inspection done. I'm not saying what group of people do that, but they tend to work in fields and farms. But that's what they do. You know, it's like they take the property, and the next minute their friends are in there, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, what happened here? It's like that's.
And sometimes it's because they don't know the proper rules and things.
They don't know
and that's not been explained to them. Yeah. Just to double back on what you said, Jim, about obviously your repairs bill and things, like obviously we've spoken about this in previous shows. A lot of your properties, some of them have come to that point where you're like, right, this one needs upgraded, and then you're doing a lot of refurbs and things on new ones just now. But in the long term, once this is all done, you're going to have stock that's at a good specification, and you'll start to then see the return for that.
It's a false economy to think I'll just tinker with it and keep repairing it as I go, and it's like putting a plaster around the burst pipe all the time. The reality is, just do it once, get it over and done with, and amortize that cost. In other words, spread that. Just look at it like you're spreading that cost over the next maybe 10 or 15 years. Because, you know, your kitchen's going to last 10 years, maybe last 15 years. Your bathroom's going to last all that time as well. So when you look at that, you're an extra £1,000 a year. Plus the fact that you actually got a really good quality tenant. We've spoken about getting higher rents as well. So you maybe get an additional, I don't know, maybe about another 20 quid a month, which is another £240 a year. But over 10 years, that's another £2,500. So another £2,500 to go towards the cost of that refurb, as well as actually keeping a tenant, which actually looks after the property, and it lasts a lot longer in terms of the improvements you've made. And your occupancy rate is high as a result as well. So therefore, you've not got that decrease as well. So you're almost benefiting by another opportunity cost, opportunity loss. Remember, we did that show at the beginning of the week.
Monday,
You're almost benefiting by maybe another £5,000 over the, no, actually, you're probably benefiting from your occupancy rate, because maybe it changes every 2 years, and it takes you a couple of months to actually get a tenant, and then you've got the costs involved in that. So you've got a 2 year, every 2 years, that's the average how long a tenant stays, and you've got every 2 years for 2 months it's down. So you've got £500 for each month, so you've got £1,000 out, and then you've got the cost to lease again, which comes in around another £500. So you've got £1,500. Multiply that by 5, because that's every 2 years to get to the 10 years. So 5 times 5,000, 7,500 plus the 2,500. So that's £10,000 over 10 years.
I think you maybe lost a few people there.
Yeah, I do. But if you slow that down, press it.
Yeah, that's there to be watched back.
The slow down button. If you press that button, you might actually understand the dynamics of that. And I will go over that in a wealth creation show at some point in time. But again, that's the opportunity cost and opportunity lost. and over a 10-year period, you're actually benefiting by £10,000, but you've only outlaid round about £10,000 to £15,000 in the first place, and you've got an easier life. So it's you can see how that works straight away about how to do that, and the gradual, and the other ones is gradual changes in allowable expenses, and loan-to-value ratios and standards of habitable homes have made the business far less viable and forced landlords either to up their game, or leave the table. And to be honest, get out if you're not prepared to do this. Just
you're not prepared to up your game. It's time to leave.
So while the landscape has undoubtedly changed in this scenario, buying to let is still around a sound prospect for the landlords with the long-term investment strategies. Now, when I talk about things like allowable expenses, it's actually got a wee bit easier for landlords on allowable expenses because the inland revenue has been more tolerant now. Whereas before they used to actually say, well, that's capital, you have to put that to the value, you can't deduct that straight away because that's not a revenue expense. And the difference between capital and revenue could go over another show completely, but we'll have done in other shows as well. One is you're replacing the existing thing that's there, which is revenue in a nutshell, and the other one is you're adding over and above that. Now, classic example before, and it's not anymore, to be honest, unless it's significant value, is if you were putting a shower over a bath and the shower wasn't there before, that would have been classed as a capital improvement, and you wouldn't be able to take it off your profits in that year. So it'd have to go to the sale of the property. So that's the only way against capital gains that would be taken off. If the shower was already there and you replaced it, then that's a revenue expense because you're just replacing like for like. So that's the difference between capital and revenue expenditure for taxation purposes. So that's got a lot easier now where they'll allow that shower because it's only like, the shower's about, a couple of £100, £200 or £300 to do that. If you're written everything out and starting again, maybe another story. But if it's like for like, you're okay. So loan to value ratios as well. I mean, that's down at 75% now, and I've got a funny feeling that's not going to be moved anytime soon.
I don't think it will.
It won't. Even the banks are nervous as well. Even corporate lending can only do up to 65%. They will not go any higher on corporate lending. For people like Barclays Bank, people like the Bank of Scotland, I've been round them all anyway, because obviously I'm at the corporate lending level now. And that's fine with me because then that then gives you a huge margin for there's going to be a property crash, and property prices drop 20%, and you've got 45% still in. So okay, so you've got 25% still in. So what's the deal there? It's like you could still exit on what we call a fire sale. So a fire sale means like if you just have to sell everything quick, you can still exit and drop 25% in value over and above any crash, and then you'll still come out with your shirt on your back. But then again, as I say, why would you want to exit if you're earning money every single month and revenue every single month?
Keep that income rather than just panic sell, basically.
And I'll talk about that because we're actually talking about that, why more landlords on tomorrow's show with the Fife property crash impending, why more landlords will buy properties. Do the math. It's a really good one, huge analytics in there. It proves it beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's the case. What's your thoughts on this?
I had a look through that, but I mean, the landscape has undoubtedly changed, and buying to let is still a sound prospect for landlords with long-term investment strategies, I think. But let's have a talk about housing shortages. I mean, the housing shortage isn't going anywhere. Rental homes are in short supply, and there is no sign of that changing anytime soon. The shortage is not only unpinning rents and property values, it's ensuring that landlords with high quality buy-to-lets attract the very best tenants and keep them for years. So I think let's have a look at numbers. Average rents are up 8% on 2021. Property prices have rose 10% between March 2021 and March this year, 2022. And according to Zoopla, the supply of rental homes is 43% down on the 5-year average. Now, I think that's astounding to me, I think, really, to be down 43%. And for me and the frontline lettings and things, to see the amount of demand for property and us to be 43% down is it's a difficult situation the whole supply and demand thing obviously is always going to be there. But I've never seen it so
when I look at the number of inquiries that come in on our post room on info Fife Properties on a Sunday night, and I look at them, the amount of inquiries for letting property is cheese.
It's crazy. I've never seen it like that.
Let's have a wee look. Let's have a wee look at Zoopla. Let's share the screen and we'll have a look at Zoopla. Where do you think the number of properties right through Fife are right now in terms of the number of properties available to rent?
At the moment, they're probably just on the other side of 100.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd say probably around 50.
No, I think they're a wee bit higher than that now.
67.
Oh, well, I thought they were around about the 100, to be honest.
And that tells you straight away, we have got all these people in Fife looking for properties to rent, are chasing 67 properties on the market.
Yeah,
right now at this point in time. And that's the properties just added. I mean, some of them are not looking bonny from the outside, but I tell you what, they'll be probably really bonny inside.
I do think I checked the other week there to see where we were at. Now, I know that we've done a lot of turnaround in the last couple of weeks, and I would imagine other agents have done so too. Because I think we were a wee bit higher than that, which I thought, that it was a lot better than it was. I mean, remember the turn of the year we were at 50, 53 or something. So.
But that's remarkable when you think about it. There's only 67 available.
Especially when we see the level of demand.
It tells you straight away that property investment is still a viable option and it's still really good demand, and it backs up by the numbers we've seen here about property prices between March to March. And the Fife area are actually going up about 10%. Incidentally, it's interesting to see that I've noticed that there's a lot more investors buying what I would class as really low demand stock. But what's driving that now is because obviously the insatiable appetite, they want to spend their money and invest it, thinking there's going to be a future. But the reality is when you get an oversupply, that type of stock is the first one to suffer because no one wants to rent it. And there is particular areas I can see that, and one I thought was a really good seasoned investor, or maybe knew what they were talking about, bought something recently. I'm not going to say where it was because that'll identify the person. But then I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, it's like I would never have bought there. It's like that doesn't make sense at all in the long term. It might give you a short term gain. This is the short term thing coming in. It might give you that short term boost, but when you have an oversupply in the rental market, no one's going to rent that property, and more than likely you're going to have to bring the rent down to actually accommodate somebody else actually getting it, because it's the usual typical bid up television thing. The rent comes down to a point where somebody jumps in and goes, that's affordable for me. So you're going to be competing with everybody else, and your occupancy is going to be low and your rent's going to be low as well. And I hope you've worked out your numbers to suggest that if interest rates go up slightly as well with the base rates, and you've maybe just got a tracker rate, then when interest rates go up and occupancy rate drops and the rental amount drops as well, you're in deep shit. It's like that's really what's going to happen, and I hope he's actually planned for this, and actually, I'm not saying plan for it as in expecting it to happen, but making sure that the tolerance level is right. If that did happen, he would still have his shirt on his back, and he'll ride throughout that, because we do have peaks and troughs all the way through the years, and I've seen it over the last 30 years. Whereas sometimes you're like this insatiable appetite for rental property, and rent's going sky high, and it's like, oh my God, I've never seen that before. Even it blows my mind. But also I've seen the point where properties in areas, a couple of areas which I have, it's like there's been not really that good demand for them, is it? And we see that then, so we understand that dynamic, don't we?
Yeah, like you say, there is peaks and troughs, and it swings and roundabouts depending on area and time of year and things like that as well. But generally, I mean, obviously, like you say, Jim, over the last 30 years for you, and obviously 12 years for myself, tenant demand is the strongest that we could ever remember it being, and tenancies are lasting longer than ever, which creates fewer void periods and more stability. I think we were looking about on average about 28 months for a tenancy.
Yes, and the void periods, classic example is occupancy rate for us is 98%. And that's a real good position to be in. That means 98% of your time your rental income is in. There's only a 2% tolerance here, and that really takes into account possibly the changeover And in other words, the time to let the property, because that's how we calculate the occupancy rate from the time it's available to the time that somebody actually is in the property for that period of time in the year.
You're always going to have that small percentage where obviously you're going to have time for changeover and things, but to keep that as minimal as possible.
Minimise that as much as possible. That's what we concentrate on. That's why we measure that statistic. To get it turned around and focused on that. And we discuss that every single week. What's happening about how are we getting that one? How are we getting that one? When are we getting that one? And when are we getting that one turned around? And it's almost religious. It's like right on it straight away.
Keep that momentum going. But landlords and their rental homes are consistently and urgently required. And the market looks to stay the same way for a long time yet. I don't see any major changes on how we are.
I don't see any change, but I think the major change is going to be it's going to be that tenants are actually going to be told that you have to go to an approved letting agent, and private landlords will eventually be phased out of being able to let them themselves unless they're suitably qualified. So individual landlords with 1 or 2 properties are going to be made to be qualified, or they have to give their property to a letting agent. I could see that happening.
I could see something like that being implemented.
It has to be, Richard. There's too much dissemination in the market, and there's too much opinions of what should be nice and what shouldn't be. I mean, there's some people that's like, what's wrong with that? When somebody moves out, all they need to do is hose it down and they can move in again. It's like, is that not a prison cell? It's and literally you've got some landlords like that. I think like that, and I'm thinking, God, you need to leave this market. And I've had that said to me at one point in time by someone years ago, many years ago, by the way, and he's no longer here. But actually, I was appalled when I heard that. It's like, really? That's how you think? You shouldn't be here. And subsequently, he's no longer here. But no, for that reason, obviously. The thing is, we're coming back to that. This is a professional sector now, and I think that's going to be the biggest change. I do think that's going to be the biggest change coming forward. That all landlords in Scotland will have to go through a letting agent or have a professional qualification in order to do it of some sort.
Yeah, definitely, I would agree. Just looking at the comments here. Roy's joining in this morning. Morning, Roy. Hope you're well.
Roy's a great advocate for the buy-to-let industry and investment properties, isn't he? So let's talk about the cost of upgrading the energy performance, because this is going to be an important one on the cards for the.
It is, and it's something that is continually discussed and considered by investors and landlords, and it's something that's in the news as well. I'll touch on it on Monday's show and the wealth creation. I've got that. I do notice
that's why a lot of landlords are exiting, because when you look at there, it's like, oh, that looks like what It's like, and then you think to yourself, can I do anything to that to get that up to the C? And it's like, no. And I'm thinking, no, that's no one I would actually invest in if that's the case. I know why they're exiting for that reason, because they realise that there's a huge bill coming.
Yeah, I mean, there is talk about maybe extending the deadline, but we'll talk about that on Monday. But there is a fair degree of fuss when the government announced its vision for energy efficiency rental homes in February. But in truth, the proposals are no stronger than the shortlisting criteria for many tenants. Nonetheless, there are a few things worth remembering. About the decent home standard. The government has admitted to not including the most vulnerable households in their report. So the strategies may well change, and I think we've already seen that already, because I think they intended to roll this out and didn't take, like I say, maybe more vulnerable properties, which would be quite difficult to upgrade, into consideration. So they will change that slightly. We don't know yet if government grants may be available, like the Green Homes scheme, which was available, or financing schemes that allow landlords to spread all or part of the cost over a few years. I would imagine that they do intend to bring something similar into practice in order to kind of facilitate people to do this. Would you agree, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think they're going.
What happens is what they do is they hope the masses actually jump in and do it first. So they expect the masses, because they didn't really want to do that straight away, because obviously they're laying out cash left, right, and centre on grants. So they hope the masses do it first, and then they get them on board. They get the masses to do it, and when the few minorities are left, they know they probably can't do it. So then they put a grant system in place, or an initiative.
And then that allows them to then also start to make the improvements.
Because ideally, they don't want to lose these people, because then it makes it more difficult for their job, because they've not got any housing to replace it with.
Yeah, I mean, for the vast majority, improving an EPC rating isn't necessarily going to be too expensive. Some landlords have seen their ratings go up by simply switching to energy efficient light bulbs and sealing off drafts and things like that. We've covered that in shows before. There are very simple, inexpensive measures that you could do to make your property more energy efficient and bring that EPC rating up.
Yeah.
The expected expenditure to get the average rental home to grade C is around 4,700, which should be easily covered over 10 to 15 years of income, producing ownership, increasing rents, and the associated capital growth.
We've calculated in previous shows it could be as much as about £15,000. Depending on what they're requiring to do, but that was before they started to put things in like, well, obviously if it's going to be cost prohibitive, like putting a ground source heat pump in, then it doesn't make sense actually to do it.
I mean, some of the least energy efficient homes in Europe, UK standards are long overdue for an overhaul. So better homes are better for everyone, and improved energy efficiency will help to protect the value of your buy-to-let whenever you come to refinance or sell.
This will be quite interesting as well, because the refinancing, I'd actually spoke to Lynn, actually puts some there. Let's see what Lynn says. If funding isn't available in terms of grants, so I think this would lead to rents being increased to pay for whatever work is done. Simple business economics, isn't it, Lynn? But the most important thing is the banks. I'm not really sure where this is coming from, but there seems to be in the ether there some message from the bank sitting saying that if your EPC isn't up to the right standard, we won't actually put a mortgage on that property, or we will downgrade that property. So we will insist that your EPC has to be a certain standard for a buy-to-let mortgage. So that actually could drive people to have to do that, whether they like it or not. And again, it's just what Lynn says. It's like, how are we going to pay for that? Now, instantly enough, obviously, if you've taken that money over successive years, made huge returns on what you're doing, and you just spent it and no reinvested it, then you're going to come a cropper. It's going to come back to haunt you. And this is the lesson we teach every single time. It's reinvest for the future, because these things will happen. You have to put money aside, and every business to do that. When I was in manufacturing, that's the first thing we did. Our profit's not there to just throw caution to the wind. The profit is there at the end of the year to reinvest in the next years and things that you want to do to improve, and to give the shareholders a return as well. That's what they're there for as a director of a company, to be the steward of the company on behalf of the shareholders. So the shareholders get a decent return, but they don't get everything. The profit is there to then reinvest for the future, for things like this that have to be done. And that's what you should do in your buy-to-let properties as well. Even if you've got one or two, this is what you should be doing.
Yeah, you should definitely treat it with the same kind of same approach, Jim, as you say, to business, because ultimately your buy-to-let portfolio and being an investor is ultimately your business. So you should have that same approach.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
So EPCs and stuff like that, and the government, and somebody's actually said, will I run out and do this? I was on the Scottish Property Network, and I was saying to them, whoa, I says, don't, for God's sake, don't do it now, because I'll guarantee you they'll change the goalpost at the last minute, and you'll have spent all that money. Now, I've learned by experience, not wisdom. So learn by my wisdom, please. Wisdom doesn't cost you money. Experience does. So I've learned by experience, because it's the smoke detectors were the first one where I hardwired everything and put conduits up everywhere, and then they went, oh, maybe we could allow wireless. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. And then
just spent thousands on hardwire smoke alarms.
The electricity, the EICRs for the electricity was like, whoa, we've got to use composite electricity boxes now because of it. Oh, you can't have metal because it could electrocute somebody if there's a bare wire in there. We're having a metal box, and it's like, so you have to use composite. So I got composite, and they went, oh, but the composite actually goes on fire, so you'll have to change them again. It's like, oh my God, it's like you're joking. I've just spent £20,000 upgrading everything, and you're telling me that this shouldn't have been done after you've said it should have been done as part of the legislation. So learn by my wisdom now. This is the wisdom from this. It's wait until it's set in stone before you go ahead and do it. Don't be the first to run out and do it, because you're the guinea pig, and it will change at some point in time. Just make sure you've got the money put aside for it, and you've got the resources to do it when it actually gets set in stone. That's the key here. That's the most important point. Don't rush out and do it right now. That's because it will change. They always
and not only not only the cost of obviously the hardware, smoke alarms and things, but the unsightly trunking and things that we ended up having to install initially, and it wasn't needed. And I think as well, a lot of years are coming up for renewal, and we're doing them, and we're seeing that there's a lot of things that need to be done now because the legislation's changed that much in 5 years since we last done them.
And that's the thing. And that is the thing. Wait till it's the time to actually do it when you have to do it. Now, it's like an MOT when you think about it. If you know it should be done before then you do it. Because if anything happens, then you're liable because you knew it should have been done. But normally, in normal circumstances, you wouldn't run out and do all the ICRs again because they are approved for the next 5 years. So it's like when the upgrade comes and the new legislation, the improvements. So I think it's the guidelines more than anything. If the guidelines have improved it, then the guys that are actually doing the ICRs now are saying, look, to be honest, you've got to probably do earth bonding and all the rest of it. You've got to do this and you've got to do that. It's going to cost you another couple of £1,000 per property. And it's like, okay, that's fine. I have put the money aside for that. So that's the key there. I have not spent things on throwing caution to the wind and buying Lamborghini Huracans. That's another story. If you've not seen that show at the start,
that was Monday's show.
If you've not seen Monday's show about my Lamborghini Huracan, go and watch it. You'll have really good fun with that. So I've not done things like that. I've actually put it aside to properly invest it.
And you've got a contingency to obviously tackle that. Let's move on and look at are there buy-to-let strategies with higher yields? So while huge 10% plus high initial yields for single lets are mostly behind us, it doesn't mean buy-to-let isn't profitable or that high yields aren't possible. So let's look at a few aspects of that. I mean, target high-ending professionals. Use the tips that we've had on one of our previous shows. We've done a blog and a vlog show on growth or yield, which buy-to-let strategy is right for you.
That show was a complete masterclass in buy-to-let.
Yeah, that was a really good one. I think that's pinned. Is that not? It's pinned on my.
It possibly might be, but I tell you what, it's like I would have wished that someone was here to tell me that when I first started. Unfortunately, there wasn't anybody there because it was never really a thing. Buy-to-let didn't exist when I started. There was no buy-to-let mortgage. It didn't exist either. So I just had to be inventive about how I created finance. But that is a complete masterclass in turning. And we're talking about huge, people are thinking, oh, you didn't get 10% in buy-to-let anymore. And so you do.
You do.
Like, and watch the show on opportunity cost we just did on the wealth creation show at the start of this week. And I'll show you exactly how you do and how I'll no spoil it. I won't spoil it. And I'll show you exactly how you do that. How you can make more than 10% yields, net yields, without you managing and taking a hands-on approach, actually hands-off. Somebody else is looking after it, us preferably, obviously, because we're teaching you how to do this. And it'll blow your mind, genuinely. It even blows my mind, some of the things that I've learned. But what's coming off the top of my head, and people don't realise, this boy kid's what he's talking about. It's like, it's everything else I've learned from everyone else over the years that I've combined into the success of knowledge that I'm actually like, okay, I know exactly how this works in this jigsaw now, and that is the end result. So everything I'm saying right now is from the people that have come before, and I've learned over that period of time from the experience I've actually taken part in, and the wisdom that we're now imparting to other people to actually learn so they don't make these mistakes anymore. But there's definitely more than 10% yields net to make in buy-to-let still, and that's before the capital appreciation. You just got to get the numbers right. Anyway, back to you, Richard.
Just obviously reiterate, growth or yield, which buy-to-let strategies is right for you. Obviously, one of our previous blogs, you will find that show on our YouTube channel. I think it's pinned on my public profile, and it'll be in the blog in this post. You can click the link straight to that. That is a really good show. And it obviously helps you to upgrade your buy-to-let to get the highest possible rent. Busy and successful people will happily pay more rent for a stylish and higher quality property with a high quality specification, and we've seen that trend countless times. So to get your property to that level, you will always attract the high earning professionals if that is your target audience.
Absolutely.
Also, if you're doing HMOs and multi-lets, you could double or triple your monthly income of your property if you take 5 or more unrelated people living in it, each on a separate tenancy. Remember that you'll need a license from the local authority, so you need to obviously apply for that. And there are stricter fire and safety regulations along with extra management. And we've covered that quite a lot. And obviously we don't deal with HMOs and things, Jim, for that very reason. There is a lot of extra work that goes into that. Is that the link you're sharing there, Jim?
Yeah. I thought I'd make it really easy for everybody. I've shared the link there now for that show. It's got the podcast on it. It's got the article on it as well. So if you want to spend 4 minutes reading it, fair enough. If you want to listen to the podcast, it's there for you to listen to. If you want to watch the show, you can watch it.
Yeah. Brilliant. So HMOs and things, if you deal with them, there are strategies that you could implement there, but obviously make sure you are following the correct licensing rules and regulations.
I just think HMOs are so much hassle.
They are a lot of work.
I'm making a fortune in HMO, and I'm like, how much time is it actually?
How much time do you have left here?
It's like, I'm making a fortune. It's like, are you actually spending a lot of time on this though? Because I've got no desire to spend a lot of time on my investment. I want to be. I mean, most people at work in industry as professionals are cash rich, but they're time poor. So what I've developed is what essentially is a property time machine, and I've now become a time lord in property. If you put it like that, I'm a property time lord. But I wanted my time back. That's the whole reason I did it. I wanted my time back. It was the most important thing to me to choose what I do with my time and where I want to put it. And that set me free. What I did, so the money was nothing but a recourse in order to set me free, in order to have my time back. Because I worked 168 hours, if not more, in industry every single week. There's only 168 hours in the week, but I worked every single one of them as an accountant and financial director. It was a killer. But I needed to do this to get out of that, and that's what this was all about for me. Yeah. So HMO doesn't float my boat, because it really sounds like a lot of work. Considering build to rent, it sounds like a lot of work as well, because you've got to build to rent it.
Yeah, we've spoken about that before.
It's a huge investment though up front in the beginning, and it's actually getting the finance and all the rest of it. And invest in less popular property. People's dream homes tend to be either period properties or brand new ones. However, some of the highest yielding buy-to-let homes are in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s because of the rent they achieve against the lower purchase prices. This is what we talked about though, and this is we talked about these then, when there's less demand, tend to be the ones that actually suffer with the lower occupancy rates, and then the rents have to come down as a result of that. So that there is many buy-to-let models and plenty of opportunities for a healthy business. With some creative thinking, openness to new ideas, and the rewards can actually be really significant for landlords and even tenants alike. Let's not forget, at the end of the day, we're providing service to a tenant who is our customer. We want to treat that person as best as possible and give them the best service as possible, because they're paying us. We're a business. That's it, at the end of the day. So we need to look after them to the best of their ability. So what do you think the next steps are, Richard?
I think, as you see, obviously, when you come back to obviously us looking after people and things, and I know they're obviously paying us, and that's what we're employed to do, or obviously myself as a letting and managing agent and things, but we, or myself, I know obviously you as well, have a passion to do that, and a passion to obviously build the knowledge on the legislation and the ever-changing things with lettings, and that's basically that is what you pay for. It's the experience and their knowledge of the market and things, and to take care of your investment ultimately, so you have your own time, and that's what you really want. You want an agent that could let you do that, and I think it brings us back to obviously the whole, as buy-to-let broken, well, no, as long as you stick to your facts, know your figures, and keep on trend, or have people dealing with things that are obviously have their finger on the pulse and are knowledgeable about those facts.
We're getting into
I know.
I'm going to finish off here, right? Property has proven itself time and time again as one of the safest investment strategies. People always need a home. That's the key here. They don't need Bitcoin all the time. They don't need gold and silver all the time. They always need a home and a roof over their head. So whatever happens in the market, your buy-to-let cannot disappear overnight. There's a reason for the phrase, as safe as houses. And that's us. That's us. Yep. Thank you very much for coming on the show. And it's goodbye from him. I've got it wrong there.
And goodbye from him.
Bye, guys.
Bye.